The Switch 2. After 8 long years of the original Switch, no, not that Switch, this one, it's finally been announced. Even though all we know at the time of recording this is that it's bigger, that it's got new fancy controllers that can ice skate, and that they snap into place with the dopamine-inducing sound of... With the announcement, I found myself thinking about the original Game Boy. My tiny 5-year-old hands trying to hit the A button on that matte green brick. The 4 AA batteries making it feel like a tungsten cube in my backpack. The day I pulled it out at daycare and the kid with a Game Boy Color laughed at me for having a fossil. These memories combined with the non-stop advertisements for the Steam Deck all over the Steam store. I already have one, okay? I can already play Binding of Isaac on the go. Get out! This modern version of on-the-go gaming wasn't how it always was. Got me wondering about where we came from and how we got here. It got me thinking about the history of handhelds. Oh, Jesus. The year is 1960. It's the best 60s outfit I had, okay? Thousands are high out of their gourds at Grateful Dead concerts. Grandma? And the progenitor to handheld gaming has finally hit the market. But this isn't for those hippies. This is for you. That's right, you. The morally flexible businessman with an aversion to the American civil rights movement and a boatload of disposable income. This right here is the Sony TV8 301. Weighing in at 13 pounds, this puppy will let you watch TV wherever you go. Oh. This thing comes equipped with an all-transistor display. That's right. That means no vacuum tubes to burn out. It has a speaker of a single elliptical coil and a crisp, distortion-free 8-inch display. You guys are calling this a handheld TV? Seriously? This thing weighs 13 pounds, dude. Now you can finally watch your favorite programming on the go, like popular TV shows in 1960. Gunsmoke. A have gun will travel, but don't worry. This travel-sized TV companion comes in at 8x7x9. The Sony Cinderblock can sit in your lap on any flight while you smoke a stogie. You can put it on the nightstand by your bedside after a really rough day of work when you don't want to deal with the kids. And don't worry, you can buy a second battery pack so you never have to tune out of your favorite show. It only costs $320 with inflation, and the batteries are made of lead, so if you do set it in your lap on a plane, testicular and ovarian cancer, here we come. So just to sum it up, this technological marvel comes in at a travel weight of 17 pounds and adjusted for inflation price of $3,000. But on a more real note, this did spearhead 20 years of portable televisions and was a proof of concept that really drove the industry forward. And although calling this thing portable is like saying the handle on the back of a GameCube makes it portable, bet you forgot about that, huh? Doesn't mean that it wasn't important for handheld media. And surprisingly, there was very little image quality loss on this TV, and it was only in production for 2 years due to low sales and high cost. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about portable TVs because, well, that's the title of the video, and I don't know, there's no TV in there. So, but I would be remiss not to mention the Panasonic Model TR001. Why do all of these TVs have, like, Android names? Did no one have a marketing department? I feel like I'm reading binary. Released in 1974, I don't have any bell bottoms, so... It's the 70s now, baby. This sucker was the first truly handheld television. To scale with this pen here, this revolutionary technology, this shaker of industries, comes equipped with a 1.5-inch screen. 1.5 inches? You know, size isn't everything, but it's something. The screen was so small that it actually came with a magnifying glass that you attach to it so that you could actually see it. Wait, so if this is the screen and you put that magnifying glass on it like this, and then you hold it up to your face to watch, kind of like this maybe? Is that that's the speaker? So the speaker is just blasting sound into your open mouth. Great design, guys. But don't worry about all that, guys. It's fine. It's totally fine. It's a super affordable 1,498 German marks, which adjusted for inflation is $3,770.51. Holy shit. Almost $4,000 for a TV I have to hold up to my face like a spyglass. Hey, can you take a look at this for me? Is that MASH on the horizon? The Panasonic Spyglass came in at 1.8 ounces and sported a rechargeable battery. It's kind of weird that both of these TVs have had rechargeable batteries. Maybe Big Battery hasn't come down on them yet. That or the batteries explode. It's probably that they exploded. Now we move on to the juicy gaming stuff. Enough with these portable TV fossils. I don't need you, Panasonic Spyglass. I don't want you, Sony Cinderblock. It's time for the future. It's time for the Mattel Auto Race. This is a game? This thing looks like a backgammon board. This 1976 technological wonder was a portal to the racetrack. Faster! Transporting the player into the driver's seat of a roaring V8 on the Indy 500. Gasoline in your nose and Coors Light on the tongue. The controls are simple. You simply drive your... That's the car? It's like one line. You are placed in the midst of a high-octane race, dodging cars until you complete 4 laps, which is getting to the top of the screen 4 times. It's got 3 buttons. This guy, which is the on and off button. This guy, which is the gear shift, and which is it's just the difficulty setting. And then this guy, which is the little car. I mean, that one's pretty self-explanatory. It just goes side to side, and you move the car. This baby was the vanguard of the single-game handhelds of the 70s, with such hits as the 1978 Pocket Quarterback.
I'm Football One, Mattel's lowest price electronic football game.
And I'm electronic quarterback, Coleco's lowest price.
I run from the line of scrimmage.
I start in the backfield and follow my blockers.
Blockers? I don't have any blockers.
This game puts you in the shoes of an offensive coordinator for the NFL. It's just the same thing. It's lines on a, 4-5 grid. And the last popular one of this era, the real beast of its generation, the Milton Bradley Simon. This multicolored memory game tested its players with a multitude of befuddling combos. Okay, I can't do this anymore. Where am I supposed to twist this Bop It? This beloved Bop It progenitor sold for an adjusted for inflation $120, and people were furious. What? People weren't furious? They actually loved it? It was the best-selling handheld game of its generation? Oh. Well, my bad. It looks like people are dumber than I thought. Also, is this thing really a handheld game? Like, it... Hey, stop pulling away from me. I'm asking the hard-hitting questions. Come on. It's 1979 now, and you're tired of the old single-use handheld games of yesteryear. You're ready for something new. As you wallow in your lack of entertaining handheld-specific games, you sit down in front of your analog TV and boot up your favorite Sunday morning cartoon, the Plastic Man comedy/adventure show. You adjust the antenna for a better signal. You see this.
Doing the same old thing every night? Well, light up those nights with Microvision, Milton Bradley's great new handheld electronic game system. Blockbuster, one of the 7 great game cartridges available, comes with the Microvision unit. Switch cartridges to Connect 4. It's a real mind tease. And for fast action, there's bowling or hitting a jackpot in Vegas slots. So for new excitement, get Microvision, the programmable game system from MB Electronics.
Huh. I was expecting a different target audience. This feat of modern engineering has 7 games on launch. 7! And they're cartridges, like a real handheld console. You have to have one. So you beg your parents to buy it for you at the reasonable, adjusted for inflation price of $212. This thing's gonna be a piece of history. That's a steal, Mom and Dad. This was the first real handheld console. The games I talked about before were more handheld games. This is a real console.
Nice car.
Okay, I get it. It's not super exciting. The other handheld consoles used a light-emitting diode, a single high-charged coil that emitted light on a grid. I think that it was averaged like 5 wide max on one of the handheld quarterback games. But this is an LCD screen. This has pixels. This thing had a host of issues, though. Being the first of its kind on the market means that it was the first to have to discover common failure points for new technology. First, the processors were put inside of each cartridge as opposed to in the console itself, which now seems obvious that you wouldn't want to do that, but remember, the guy who said that doctors should wash their hands in hospitals was put in an insane asylum because they thought he was f***ing crazy. So anyway, what this meant was that the processors were a bit cheaper and they would burn out pretty quickly. And the new LCD screens were so new that they didn't know that you should seal them well yet. And they often broke in ways that would leak the LCD fluid through and into other pixels, permanently darkening them. For some reason, the cartridges go over the screen, which at first I didn't understand until I realized that the faceplate for the buttons changes on the cartridge. So I guess it makes sense, but the NES existed, dude, and A and B. So, I was wrong. The NES didn't come out until 4 years after the Microvision. Whoops. Sadly, the Microvision failed to live for long and was discontinued in 1982. This was due to the rate of failure in the cartridges and in the console itself. But so what if my $20 game breaks? It's only 20 bucks. Wait. 1979. That's a $100 game. Don't you dare throw that. I don't want this piece of shit. It was $200, you ungrateful. The Microvision was a pioneer, though, and it laid the groundwork for future companies to copy them. And I mean, it inspired some small Japanese company that was working on a single game handheld in 1980 called Flamin' Watch? Flamin' Crotch? After the Microvision, it was a rush to the bank for tech companies because a little guy named Hasbro managed to make the equivalent of $65 million in 1 year off of a circle with 4 colored buttons. Now, before I get into the absolute onslaught of consoles that are to come, I want to talk a little bit about Game & Watch. The year is 1979. You're Gunpei Yokoi, and you're on a train. While you're on your way to work, you're people watching, as you do when you're on a train in the early 80s with nothing to do. And you notice a bored businessman is playing with the buttons on his LCD watch. And you have an idea. What if you had a watch that let you tell time and kill it too? In a moment of rage in your living room, to bury time in your backyard under a gravestone with the name of an old pet so no one asks questions. But this revelation on a commute spawned a slew of popular handheld games. A slew of handheld games that, when they got more complicated, forced Yokoi to design the D-pad. Not only that, but the first flip game that flips like a little pocketbook, like this little popular console that came out in 2011 that was super, super popular. Between 1980 and 1990, a ton of handheld consoles were released. Everyone trying to capitalize on the hot, bikini-clad gaming market that was just asking for them to talk to them. Even though the gaming market was facing the opposite direction and talking to its friends instead of trying to talk to strangers, but this is the 80s, and a bikini-clad gaming market means that the gaming market wanted to impress needy, overconfident tech companies and not that they liked the way the bikini looked in a mirror. So the suitors line up. First up, in 1981, we have the NTEX Select-A-Game. This baby's got twice the colors, red and black. Plus, it supports 2 players with these awkward 2-tiered buttons where you and your boys can hold hands without actually holding hands because you're just trying to game together and everyone's overthinking it. It is insecure about its smaller 16:7 screen and will cry if you mention it. This absolute flop was only supported for 1 year and only released 6 games, 3 of which were complete ripoffs of other arcade games, which is a bad look. Next up, we have NTEX stepping into the ring once again in 1982 with the NTEX Adventure Vision. Come on, guys, do you really have to put your name in the title of every console? It sounds desperate. This sucker brings the arcade to your dining room for the adjusted for inflation price of $190. She adjusts for my inflation till I... Tired of clunky buttons and sweaty hands on your portable console? This puppy's got a real joystick. This puppy avoided the frailty of early LCD screens and the high price of CRT by creating a rotating LED display. Guys, this thing isn't spinning. Also, why is it considered a handheld? What they did with this display, though, was keep the price low while managing to have a 150 by 40 pixel display. This shit's getting too close to reality, man. Pretty soon we're not gonna be able to tell the difference, dude. Although this console was technically impressive, it didn't manage to do well, only acquiring 2 games and selling 50,000 units in the 1 year it was on the market before being discontinued. NTEX, guys, you gotta last longer than a year. I talked you up to the industry. How do you think this makes me look? Sadly, this is the last we'll be seeing of NTEX, since they went out of business a few years later. Let's just say that stealing other people's game ideas instead of making your own isn't a super sustainable industry practice and ends up with... Next, we have the Palmtex portable video game system in 1984, known for its slimmer, smaller profile as opposed to its naming conventions. This guy went through another name during development, the home computer... I can't even say it, dude. It's so bad. The Home Computer Software Super Micro. Guys, how is that name worse? What set the Palmtex apart from its competitors is that the cartridges attached to the rear of the screen. What this meant is that each cartridge could have its own individual colored backboard that made the gameplay more interesting. A smart design decision that sadly would mean nothing because this absolute flop was found to have a major flaw right before shipping. The screen that they were so proud of was absolutely impossible to see unless the light of God was shining down at the exact right angle. It was so bad that stores refused to carry it after getting a demo. And let's just say, you know your product's bad if the Angel Dust railing execs at Toys R Us in the 80s weren't willing to put this thing on their shelves. Now, sadly, this little guy was never able to get his sea legs and was liquidated off the port deck plank and peacefully, oh so peacefully, passed on to handheld heaven, where hopefully it was bright enough for you to see the screen. By that, I mean they discontinued it and sold it via mail order with a backlight attachment. Sad. They didn't even last a year. Still in 1984, we see the release of the Bandai Digicase in Japan. Holy shit, that's a company I recognize. Despite being an easy way to play the classic hits of handheld games in Asia, this baby never made it to US markets. But we have the longest lasting console so far, being shipped out in Europe in 1986. The final release of 1984 was the Epoch Game Pocket Computer. This baby had it all. A slick 80s logo, a 6-screen that could display more complicated images with 75 by 64 pixels, and this puppy's got 7 games, which isn't a lot, but is the most that any of these have had so far. Wait, seriously? That's the most they've had? Puzzle games made up 6 of this console's games, 5 of them being on cartridges and the other 2 being on the console itself. This visionary never managed to get off its feet, even in its home country of Japan, which is honestly perplexing. The console was not that expensive at $163 adjusted for inflation. The screen was capable of displaying text, which none of the others had done yet. And just listen to that audio. After doing some research, I found a couple opinions on why it didn't do well. Some people said that it was because it had mostly puzzle games, but that doesn't make sense considering that puzzle games were the most popular type of game in Japan at the time. Another possible reason is that this shit was kind of big and cumbersome. This shit won't fit in my pocket. You guys lied to me. Another possible reason isn't even on the console itself, but simply that people think the market wasn't ready for this yet. But in my opinion, what I think it was is that this thing is ugly. It looks like someone slapped a screen and some buttons on a 2x4. This guy looks like the gaming equivalent of a pocket protector. After George Orwell's 1984, nobody really tried the market for 5 long years. 5 years of the market having time to grow and really thinking about what it wanted. It was doing hot yoga in LA. It was getting avocado toast at its local cafe. It was having its hot girl summer. It was fooling around with other products for a few years. Chex Mix hit the market in 1987, Lunchables in 88. But the market was finally ready to give handhelds a shot. And god damn it, did they want that shot. Man, this metaphor is getting out of hand. But I'm not getting rid of it. 1989 to 1990. People are wearing denim and pastel tracksuits. We sent the Space Shuttle Discovery into space. Seinfeld just premiered, and Texas v. Johnson ruled that burning the American flag is considered a form of free speech. The market is at a bar stool. Good Thing by Fine Young Cannibals is playing just a little too loudly over the speakers, and it's the warm weather of July. The front door jingles, and the chatter of the bar stills. The first of these absolute chads to hit the market, the fighter you've all been waiting for, weighing in at 10.6 ounces with a height of 5.8 inches. This 2.5-inch screen console wows its fans with its simple, easy-to-use buttons. Its sleek, crisp profile, and this super sick screen border. Now introducing the Nintendo Game Boy. Nintendo, fresh off of the success of the NES and the Game & Watch series, was looking to revolutionize the handheld market. To do so, it dropped this surprisingly simple handheld. Despite being the 4th best-selling console of all time, the story of the Game Boy is an underdog story. 2 lead devs spent the majority of the development process in heated debate. Gunpei Yokoi, the creator of the Game & Watch consoles that I mentioned before, and a new kid on the scene, Satoru Okada. Satoru Okada was the one who brought the idea of a console like the Game Boy. But leadership over the project was given to Gunpei Yokoi due to his previous success with the Game & Watch series. Yokoi was a realist. He was a you can't fly just by jumping off a building and spreading your arms, dumbass, you'll die kind of guy, you know? He wanted the console to be simpler, to utilize technology that they already knew worked. He wanted to make a console that was a lot like the DigiCase, but for Game & Watch games. But Satoru was an idealist. He was the, well, squirrels fly with those weird little skin flaps, so why can't I? But both Satoru and Yokoi had something in common. They were both incredibly stubborn. These 2 men would get into increasingly intense shouting matches over the trajectory of the project. Satoru would demand that the console utilize a dot matrix style LCD screen and use cartridges similar to the NES. Internally, the console had been given a nickname, the Dame game, or Hopeless game. But these 2 men were the right combination of people at the right time. Yokoi's pragmatism pushed Satoru to accept a black and white grayscale screen over the full color screen that he wanted. He managed to persuade Satoru to skip the backlight and extend the battery life, to use the D-pads that they already had as opposed to an analog stick to make the console more easily portable. Both of these things were major contributors to the console's success. Meanwhile, Satoru was adamant that they followed Nintendo's design philosophy, that great games sell consoles. And the result? The 4th best-selling console of all time. The Game Boy people's elbowed the competition, absolutely destroying them with significantly better battery life and a much cheaper console. But the year of handhelds has only just begun. We still have 5 more contenders. Next in the ring, weighing in at 18.3 ounces, a height of 10.8 centimeters, this absolute white boy sports a 3¼ inch color screen and a built-in backlight, capable of displaying up to 75 frames a second. This ambidextrous handheld is here to break your wallet over its knee, Bane style, coming in at an adjusted for inflation price of $440. Now introducing the Atari Lynx. This straightened out boomerang is what happens when the devs get eyes bigger than their stomach, and no one's there to tell them, no, don't put all that shit on it. From a modern perspective, this console is actually quite impressive. Originally, they were even going to put in a localized multiplayer network using infrared, which I don't get. Like a TV remote? What? It was made to be playable from either side. Despite all its tech, the Atari Lynx was in a pickle. It was beat out in portability and screen by the upcoming Game Gear, and by durability, affordability, and battery life by the previously released Game Boy. What this means is that the Lynx came in third behind both Sega and Nintendo. It only managed to sell 2 million consoles between its two iterations, which compared to the previous numbers is impressive, but when you look at the 118 million of the Game Boy, it's a little rough. There are two true killers for this console. The first is that it had a 4.5-hour battery life. Now remember, this guy is using 6 AA batteries. That means that you're going through one of these in one day of gaming. Imagine selling that. It would cost more than the console to run this thing through the amount of time I've put into single games. This is combined with the lower quality game cartridges. Due to the design of the cartridges transitioning about halfway through the development process, there were a lot of issues with them. What I mean by issues is that they had no save feature. Which, come on, guys. Seriously? Like, what? The Microvision had a save feature. Originally, they were gonna try and make it like a tape with like a reel, which how? The Atari Lynx was around for about 6 years. 2 years in, they released the Lynx 2, which was smaller, lighter, and had a better screen, but it still didn't really help the console considering that it only had 73 games in those 6 years. Still in 1991, next on the scene, hailing from Big Daddy Sega, the last of the big three, weighing in at a whopping 21 ounces with batteries. This VHS tape with the screen isn't even in the same weight class, but it's fighting anyway. 11.3 centimeters tall with a full color screen. Introducing the Sega Game Gear. Now this market bully was advertised as the cooler, more mature handheld console. I mean, this thing's got full color and a library of games that include some stuff that might not be okay for your buddy Nintendo. This is the console for adults. Adults with a large disposable income, because this thing takes 6 AA batteries just like the Lynx and only lasts 3.5 hours, so hope you got a good deal on batteries. There is something to be said about the Game Gear being the console for adults. It had a better, more comfortable profile for larger hands, but Sega decided in a very 90s move to... Let me just show you.
Whoa. Color.
Outside of the offensive advertising, this baby's got color and a lot of it. It's got stereo sound with headphones. It's got this tinfoil hat that lets you watch TV on it. Don't worry, it's only $130. Now, considering that the console is $149.99, that's crazy. But I'm gonna buy it anyway because I gotta watch that season premiere of Seinfeld. Now, this console was rushed. It was mainly developed quickly to be a quality contender against Nintendo. They focused really heavily on the improved hardware and the color screen, but knew that games were going to be a contention point. But despite their focus on getting people to develop games for the Game Gear, they still had trouble. Because the Nintendo Game Boy came out much earlier and already had an audience, they were having trouble getting devs that weren't already working on Nintendo products, an issue that would later transfer over to the home console industry. Now, despite Sega's trouble with games, they still managed to pump out about 300 for the console, which majorly beats out Atari's Boomerang thing. Now that our top three have entered the ring, let's take a look at the results. Coming in third place with 2 million lifetime units sold, we have the Atari Lynx. Good job on the podium finish, boys, but in the words of Ricky Bobby, you're just second last. In second place, making the Atari Lynx look like the Atari house cat, we have the Sega Game Gear. With a lifetime unit sold of 10.62 million, this small-town bully managed to beat out Atari, but still lost to our household champion, the Nintendo Game Boy. Our top contender had a whopping lifetime sales of 118.7 million units sold. Looks like having over 1,000 games and not eating a 24-pack of batteries a day really came in on the long term, guys. Let's hold a round of applause for our champion. I can't hear you. 118 million across multiple iterations of the console, including the Game Boy Pocket, the Game Boy Light, and the Game Boy Color. All other consoles included to each other model and therefore is representative of similar possible sales numbers. Before we conclude our show for the evening, let's go over some honorable mentions. Released later the same year as the Game Gear, our fourth place contender is the Turbo Handheld Entertainment System. With a name longer than its shelf life, this bad boy will break your wallet, your retirement, and take out a second mortgage on your home. Released at an adjusted for inflation price of $580. This cat-eared Palm Pilot is a handheld version of the TurboGrafx 16, which couldn't have done super well because I've never heard of it before. This puppy had a color screen and guzzled batteries just like the rest. The problem with this console is that sometimes the speaker would break right out of the factory. And because of the new technology on the screen, it would also break. Hope you didn't want to see or hear your new $600 game because chances are you couldn't with this guy. Also coming out late 91, this shameless Game Boy knockoff hit the East Asian markets like a wet noodle. Having similar battery life and hardware to an original Game Boy, this monochrome screen had a green filter on it, which makes every game look like it's being played through a thick layer of snot. Speaking of games, nearly every single one released for this console was a knockoff, with such hits as Snowman Legend and Treasure Hunter looking like Zelda Mario and Mario Zelda respectively. Now, I had trouble finding any definitive sales numbers on this item, but considering that it went out of business within 2 years, it couldn't have been great. Next up, we have the Game Master. Not to be confused with the Game Boy, the Game Gear, the Gamate, the Select-A-Game, or the Epoch Game Pocket Computer. Oh, speaking of names, this bad boy went through 5 during its production. That means that you can find this console under such names as the Super Game, the Gametronic, the Game Plus, and the Sistema 2000. Oh, and don't worry, if you were confused about all its names, it also was produced by 6 different companies. The Game Master was technologically inferior to both the Game Boy and the Gamate, which is impressive considering that that was the biggest contention point of the original Game Boy. But I guess that's what happens when you have the entire coaching staff of the New England Patriots working on your console. The Game Master ended up with about 16 games and got put out of production after a year and a half in favor of one of the 6 companies' next console, which I'll talk about later. We've finally gotten to the end of our 1989 to 1990 lineup, and I'm happy to inform you that I have completely forgotten about the whole market on the dating scene idea, so I guess it's married now. The Game Boy and the market got married. It was a whirlwind romance. None of the other consoles could match up to its battery life, its games. I don't really know where I was going to end this. It's 1992 now, and the handheld gaming gold rush of 1989 to 1990 is a thing of the past. You see, now companies understood what made the Game Boy so successful. It was the monochrome screen. It was the battery life. It had nothing to do with the over 1,200 games that the console had during its lifespan. Nothing at all. The Witara Supervision was cheap, and I'm talking 2/3 the price of the Game Boy cheap. Now, because of this, the Witara Supervision actually did manage to garner some market attention, but sadly it saved those costs by stealing the design of the Game Boy for the flat version, with the second version being this weird flip phone one that only had 2 positions: flat and 45 degrees. And this guy doesn't come with it. The killer of this console was a super cheap, blurry screen. And also
shit games.
The 1992 Mighty Ducks were a terrible hockey team. That was until lawyer Gordon gets into a drunk driving incident that forces him to do community service coaching the team. Can he bring this ragtag group of... This is the wrong script. The 1993 Megaduck was another major commercial failure. This bad boy looks like if a Game Boy just ate Thanksgiving dinner, with buttons that Miami Dolphins green that was so popular in the 90s. The Game Duck had an idea though. Use similar hardware to the Game Boy and try and sell in markets that the Game Boy hasn't quite hit yet, like Brazil. Sadly, this bad boy failed to find any purchase because of shit games. The next console to be released was in 1995, and it was a bit of an outlier. You see, the Sega Nomad... Oh shit, wrong hole, that's the cartridge hole. Oh no, get me out! You see, this bad boy was capable of playing nearly every one of the 500 games released for the Genesis. Not only that, but you could connect it to your TV. This baby was ready to crush the market. It had games already. Hell, it used the same cartridges as the Genesis. Well, the cartridge did make the console look kind of weird, and Sega never did learn. You see, the console was too expensive. The Sega Nomad was released at $440 adjusted for inflation, and it had a very poor battery life. 4 hours. Sega, you guys have to learn. You cannot make a console that guzzles 6 AA batteries and the amount of time that a flight from LA to Houston takes. Come on! But despite all this, the Nomad was slated for success. It could play all the same games that you already owned for your Genesis, and was bound to do well in US markets where it was already a popular console. And the ads were... Oh my god, that is way too much color, guys. So Sega was finally gonna do it. It was finally... Huh? What's that? Nintendo just released 2 games? I mean, that's normal. Nintendo drops a bunch of games. What are they called? Pokemon Red and Blue? Next up, we have another both unique and 1995 release with the Bandai Design Master. Where are the buttons? Why does this thing look like the screen to a cash register? Oh my god, is that a stylus? It's the first touchscreen, and it shows, with only having 4 games released for it. So, no one's gonna buy it. Guys, you can't release a console with just 4 games. Wait, are 2 of those Dragon Ball Z? Sadly, this guy was only ever released in Japan and was undermined once again by Nintendo when they released the Game Boy Pocket just a few months later. Game.com. Is it a console? Is it a website I used to use to play flash games in the computer lab of middle school while Miss Spencer had her back turned? Is it a stupid name? Yes. Yes, it is. This console was released in 1997. When we'd finally started to move past those 90s pastels and on to jerseys with chains. Into the Game.com, the console that tried to gaslight you into buying it.
I was surprised for all the slackers, but nothing better to do than play games and surf the net all day. GameCom!
Is it just me or does this guy look like tiny Guy Fieri? This thing looked like the Game Gear, except without the ergonomics and a lot uglier. But don't worry, gamers. This thing's gonna have an internet connection. And it's advertised as the first touchscreen. You hear that, Bandai Design Master? You didn't hit Western market. That means you don't exist. It doesn't really work like you think it does. When you have a game, it uploads your scores to a website. That's it. That's all it does. You can't surf the internet. You just get a website with your score on it that you can't check on the console, by the way. You cannot. Not only were no multiplayer games released for this internet age console, it also only had 20 games. What's actually impressive is that it also had 20 canceled games. That is quite the failure rate. Next up from the geniuses over at SNK. Oh, it's the Neo Geo guys. It's the Neo Geo Pocket. This console released in Japan in 1998 with a monochrome screen. Only a year later hitting US markets with a color one. This baby girl came with a variety of fits. We got the platinum silver for all you basic gamers. We got the stone blue for all the boys out there. And we got the camouflage brown for all you hiding in the woods gamers. Yo, where'd it go? Why is there just a floating screen? You see, the Neo Geo learned from its competitors. It didn't put in a backlight, so it ended up with a 40-hour battery life off of 2 AA batteries. Pretty impressive. Well, it also has a very nice screen. The color version was only slightly more expensive, and it only had 6 games. I mean, you win some, you lose some. So what did the Neo Geo Pocket in? It had everything going for it. It had a great battery life, nice screen. The Game Boy Color came out 7 days before the monochrome version of this console. And sadly, the game side wasn't so bad. It had a Capcom fighting game, Fatal Fury, King of Fighters. Are these all fighting games? But despite its good games, it just couldn't match up to the power of the Game Boy Color. And it was discontinued by 2001. By the time it was discontinued, it did have 70 games, but it just wasn't enough. Now, about the Game Boy Color. This opaque plastic and goofy 90s lettering has a special place in my childhood heart. But is it its own console? Kinda. So he's got a cool new look, a color screen, he's lighter, smaller, but he's more of a transitionary console. The Game Boy Color uses much of the same tech and code. It just has a color screen and an improved version of the 8-bit processor that was used in the original Game Boy. But the story behind the development and release of the Game Boy Color is actually directly related to our next console, the WonderSwan. In 1997, Bandai announced the upcoming WonderSwan. Really? WonderSwan? That's a terrible name. When news of Bandai's new handheld dropped, Nintendo was already in dire straits. You see, their stock prices were at an all-time low due to the recent loss of Gunpei Yokoi, the lead developer of the original Game Boy. You see, he released the Adventure Vision. And this little guy flopped super hard. When Gunpei Yokoi resigned from Nintendo, and by resigned, I do mean that Nintendo threw him out like an angry ex-girlfriend. Anyway, when Gunpei Yokoi left, he immediately opened an independent development studio. Who was this development studio's first customer? It was Bandai. So Bandai contracts out Gunpei Yokoi's new studio and has him start working on something new. The Wonder Swan. Now this isn't even why the story's crazy. It has a tragic ending. In 1997, after the Wonder Swan was announced, Gunpei Yokoi died in a car accident. Who was in the car with him when he died? A Nintendo executive. Gunpei was driving and rear-ended a truck. Then, when he got out of the car, he got hit on the highway. Now, Gunpei Yokoi died later in the hospital, and there is a part of me that is very suspicious of this occurrence. You see, maybe I'm just ruined by all the Boeing shit, but it does seem very coincidental. But Yokoi died, the Wonder Swan was delayed, and the Game Boy Color came out first. And the Game Boy Color did fantastic. Well, all's well that ends with a man dying tragically on the highway and a multi-billion-dollar company making boatloads of cash. The Wonder Swan was released in monochrome in 1999, color in 2000, and with a full LCD screen in 2001. Although this console never left Japan, it was actually quite successful, capturing about 8% of the Japanese handheld market, which is the best that anybody's done against Nintendo. It was playable both horizontally and vertically. It was powered for a 30-hour battery life off of a single AA battery. It was pretty cheap, coming in at about $50 adjusted for inflation, but it was ugly. Oh, so ugly. And although the console was seeing early success, it never actually managed to make it into US markets despite negotiations being in the works. This bad boy was discontinued in 2003 after selling 3.5 million consoles. At the end of its lifespan, it had 90 games, including Final Fantasy. But the console was ultimately killed in a car accident on the side of a highway, tragically, dying in the hospital because of its competitor releasing its own console. Next up, we have the one you've all been waiting for. It's colorful. It's powerful. It's innovative. It's the... Wait, that's not the Game Boy Advance. What is that thing? It looks like a phone from the Rugrats. Does this thing even play games? Please tell me this thing is a calculator. Oh, it is? Oh, it's also a PDA? Oh, okay. It also texts via radio network? Okay, that's kind of interesting. Oh, it's also an MP3 player. Wow, this thing's kind of seems convenient. Oh, it does also play games. Oh, and they're all free. Wow, that's kind of cool. Guess I have to talk about it.
Cyberco. Wireless chat, email, interactive gaming, free downloads every day. Cyberco.
Now, this one is a bit of an outlier. It's mostly a PDA with some games, but it was advertised as... Is that an ad? It's kind of racist. Forgot it was 2000. There were actually a ton of free games for this guy, and it used a localized radio-based network to allow people to use it, like a really ugly portable computer with internet. God, that thing is hideous. It had first-person shooters too, which I was not expecting. Can this baby run Halo 1? Do I even want to play Halo in grayscale on this weird sea creature thing? The Cyberco actually saw a moderate amount of success in the early part of its lifespan, but it started to dwindle out when phones started to get more readily available internet. Wait, phones didn't always have internet? What do people watch TikTok on? sadly, when an even uglier, less charming version of the Cybeco was going to hit the market, it was delayed by the dot-com crisis of the early 2000s. That, and it was slated to be released on September 15th, 2001, which I feel like something happened around then. Something big. What was it? What date? September 2001. September 15th, 2001. It's 2001, and the handheld market has more competition than ever before. We have the Wonder Swan, and although it looks like a Tamagotchi that saw the wrong side of a tenderizing mallet, it is a 16-bit console with a full-color LCD screen for the modern equivalent of $50. The Neo Geo Pocket is simple. It's easy on the eyes, easy on the hands, has a full-color version too. And yet the Nintendo Game Boy is still running on an 8-bit processor. Sure, this thing has color now, but it's kind of a fossil. I mean, look at these graphics. Ugh, it's so crunchy. It's the kind of shit my grandpa would play. Hey, you guys hear that? Remember how stressed Nintendo was when the Wonder Swan got announced and so they released the Game Boy Color? Well, they pulled an audible. This is Satoru Okada. He was the visionary side of the original Game Boy's development. But when they completed the console, he wasn't done. He had wanted to build something else all along. And so he went into the lab and he chefed up something he called Project Atlantis. Now this CIA coup never got off the ground. I mean console. This console, not... Project Atlantis had to be shelved for the good of mankind. This thing was simply too powerful. This puppy had a 32-bit processor. It had a full-color screen. This thing was fast. But it's 2001 now, baby. We have a Space Odyssey scheduled for this year. And this robot seems like a pretty cool guy. Not only that, but we just got Wikipedia. The future is now. And so is the Game Boy Advance. This gaming football has a big old color screen, but no backlight, so you have to play this somewhere that's really well lit. But look at this thing, man. It's like Mario's really on the beach, and it fits in your hand. Oh wait, that's an ad of Mario on the beach. Also, these bumpers are kind of awkward to play. Oh, did I mention that's the most expensive handheld on the market at an adjusted for inflation $170? But this shit's got games, man. I'm talking Yoshi's Island. I'm talking Super Mario 3. I'm talking Castlevania Circle of the Moon. Now, I remember the Game Boy Advance fondly, but I also remember having to sit in a hospital room just to have enough lighting to be able to see the screen on this thing. Oh, wow, they knew. They knew that. This thing had early motion controls. I mean, not many games used it, but I remember WarioWare making me flail my tiny little arms around, giving my dad a heart attack because I was holding a week's paycheck in my hand like a dead fish on Tinder. Now, although the Game Boy Advance was received pretty well, and with 85 million sales, it is the second worst selling handheld that Nintendo has produced. Now, it's still 2001, and with all this new tech, the fast development of the internet, there's a new kind of gamer clawing their way out of the primordial ooze. The PC gamer, the open source gamer, the I know how to jailbreak Halo 1 Combat Evolved and put it on a flash drive and then boot it up on a library PC at school so that I can play it during class with 3 of my closest friends. Kinda gamer. In comes the GP32. This overweight Xbox controller with the screen is the equivalent of a little handheld computer. And it's way more of one than that decrepit old Cybeco. And it doesn't look like a sea creature. This puppy has internet. It runs on a custom version of Windows that allows you to play those old PC games. Plus, this thing doesn't have cartridges. It uses a fancy new thing called an SMC card to store games. Wait, isn't this just the thing on credit cards? Can I buy games with my games? Sadly, this Korean console didn't do too well. Mostly because companies didn't want to sell it, assuming that the emulation part of it would encourage pirating, which, I mean, that's what it was made for, guys. Despite not selling well, the GP32 was sold until 2006 before it was discontinued, which is sad because look at this commercial. Dude, this is sick. I kind of want one now. Now I'm going to start moving quite a bit faster because we have a lot of consoles remaining, and they stop getting as interesting the closer we get to the modern era. Next up, we have a unique one, the Aquapulse Peace, another open source console that was made only in Japan and was sold in adult-only sections. You want to know why? It's because this thing was made to play hentai games. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't all hentai games, but it could play hentai games. So that's what it's for. That's what it's for. And, I mean, visual novels aren't always porn, especially nowadays, but in 2001 Japan, oh yeah, this is a monochrome porn machine. The 2003 N-Gage, the Nokia Gaming Taco. The games in this thing go behind the battery. So that means you have to take the battery out of your phone to put a new game in. Brilliant design, guys. Also, it's $500 and the keyboard is a nightmare. There's a new king in town, the 2003 Game King. This is the reigning monarch of cheap Chinese knockoffs. It might look like a Game Boy Advance, but it's only 8-bit. Did I mention it's cheap? The screen's cheap. The games are cheap. But you know what isn't cheap? The 4 other consoles that they released within the next 5 years. The Game Boy SP came out. It's a little gaming laptop, and now it has a rechargeable battery and a backlight. Also, it doesn't look like Stewie Griffin's head. You like PDAs, right? It's the early 2000s. Everyone needs a personal assistant to help keep track of all the bank loans we're throwing around. You can't quite yet belt commands at your Amazon Home Spy to remind you of all the plans you'll definitely not do anyway. You can't tell it to set alarms for your laundry that you'll leave in the washer for 4 hours, or remind you about that chicken bake recipe that you definitely wanted to eat when you were hungry, but then when you got to the store and it reminded you to buy the ingredients, you forgot what they were for, and anyway, the Tapwave. This is a touchscreen console that can play Doom. This can play Tomb Raider. Gunner games on the go! But like in a different way than the Aquapulse Peace from earlier. It can play music, it can play movies, but if you want to play movies, you have to put them through a converter on your PC, then put them on an SD card, then put them in there, but sometimes the converter wouldn't work and you get corrupted files, and anyway, it's $510. Yeah, it's 2004 now, and Nintendo just announced the DS. This baby's like an SP, but wide. It's got 2 screens, and one of them is a touch screen. This thing's got Wi-Fi. This thing's got a speaker built into it. I mean, not a speaker, a microphone. No shit, it has a speaker. They've all had speakers. The TV at the start had a speaker, dumbass. How am I even supposed to use 2 screens, man? It's too much. Mind you, this is years off from my 3 screens and a phone era, so. This thing was crazy. Who cares if the bottom screen juts out like a weird rectangular pimple? I can do a 360 kickflip with my tech deck off this thing. And this thing is fat. You think I could have fit this in my pocket in middle school? Yeah, I could have. This is the early 2000s. This is baggy jeans era. I could have put a 24-ounce soda in those bitches. As we've seen, if you've been paying attention, the DS is not the first console to have a touchscreen, but it is the first console that tried to utilize it in its games as anything other than a form of menu navigation. This overweight SP let me pet my dog with that stylus. Hey, buddy. Oh, I haven't fed you in 20 years, huh? Now, interestingly enough, the DS was never intended to be a mainline handheld. It was actually supposed to be a third option to go alongside the Game Boy Advance and the GameCube. You see, at this point, Nintendo was concerned about the reputation it was getting for being a conservative game company. Hilariously, Nintendo never expected the DS to be successful, and many in the company expected the sales to fall off after the initial hype. But the DS was so successful that it actually completely changed the trajectory of the company's games in the future. Now, the new tech made the original DS quite expensive, and it never did super well until the DS Lite was released. The DS Lite received the majority of the DS's lifetime 154 million console sales. And it makes sense because in my experience, I couldn't afford the original DS so soon after the Game Boy Advance came out, and I had just gotten my SP. But when the DS Lite came out, it was both cheaper and smaller, so it was a lot easier to persuade myself to buy it. And by myself, I mean my parents. It was a lot easier to persuade my parents to buy it. Now, at this point, Nintendo was handheld gaming's heavyweight champion. The closest that any console had come to Nintendo's numbers was 11 million for the Game Gear. For frame of reference, to this point, the worst selling console that Nintendo has ever sold as a handheld was the 3DS, with 75 million sales. But that was about to change, because a new heavyweight was about to enter the market. A company fresh off of the success of the best-selling console of all time. Someone who had proven that they could wrestle with the likes of Nintendo. Enter the PSP. The PSP was powerful. Like, can play games at almost the same level as a PS2 powerful. It has a big screen. It can play movies, watch TV. It has an MP3 player. It used these tiny little discs for games. It had an internet browser and free online gaming. It had it all. But when Sony tested it, it sucked down battery like a gamer drinking Mountain Dew Code Red. After initial testing, Sony found that the UMD, or Universal Media Disc, come on guys, it's the Ultra Mini Disc, sucked down battery when it was reading it. So what they did is they designed a way for the console to read the disc with fewer rotations. Not only this, but the processor was also too power hungry. So what they did is they throttled it to 2/3 of the speed to save battery life. Now, even after all this, the battery life of the PSP was still only about 4 to 7 hours. But considering that the battery is rechargeable, it's not terrible. However, this is in comparison to the Nintendo DS's 10 to 15 hours on another rechargeable battery. Not only was the PSP significantly more powerful and more power hungry than the DS, it also was significantly more expensive. At release, it was $249.99. This is compared to the DS's $149.99. Adjusted for inflation, that is $252 to $420. Now, the Nintendo DS and PSP sales get a little bit tricky. Based on the sources that I was looking at, I found some conflicting information. Despite these conflicting numbers, there was a consistent trend between the two. At the release of both consoles, the DS did better, significantly better. I would attribute that to the rabid Mario fans clawing at the Best Buy's doors and trampling that poor employee just to get to their new game. Advertising for the DS was a lot more aggressive than the PSP's, which was weird. And oh my god, Sony, what the fuck? That plus this DS commercial. You want to what? To touch you? Down there? All right. But despite the DS having a far superior launch, after about 2 years, the PSP was pulling ahead. It was actually outperforming the DS, although just barely. Probably due to the new price drop down to $169.99 and the new aggressive level of advertising that they had started to do.
They're getting hustle, KB.
Not gonna lie.
We need publicity for the PSP.
This kid kind of rocks.
We're gonna do something about it.
But Sony's one-up on Nintendo wouldn't last, and the DS Lite alone would outperform the lifetime sales of the PSP. Sales of each console came out to be 80 to 82 million for the PSP and 154 million for the DS. In my research, I found a few different opinions as to why the PSP was outshone so hard by the DS. Some say that it was the much higher price point. Some say that it was brand loyalty and franchise games that were available for one console and not for the other. But what I think it really comes down to is the width of each console's audience. The PSP is a more traditional console. The target audience for this thing is men in their teens up to 30s. It's a much narrower audience than the Nintendo DS, which Nintendogs is a great example of. This game is for everyone. The whole family can take care of a dog and a console. Everyone loves this thing. I love you. You're so fucking cute, man. Come on. Go give you. Come here. Come on. And although Sony did have a good amount of AAA quality games released for the PSP, it couldn't really match up to a Nintendogs. The Nintendo DS capitalized on the social gaming aspect of a portable console. Games like Animal Crossing make you want to buy the console to play with your friends. If your friend has a PSP and is playing God of War alone in a corner, you're not going to be like, wow, that looks so fun. The same way you are when you have a group of 3 or 4 people all talking and gushing about how cute their Animal Crossing towns are. Especially in an era where online gaming was coming into its own. Wait, is that a Miku PSP? Miku, shouldn't you be in Fortnite, you know? But these two titans were not the only people trying to capitalize on the market. And there was a new age of handhelds on the horizon. The pirating console. The open source handhelds. But before we get into the Long John Silvers, into the Blackbeards, and the Scallywags of the open source consoles, I would like to hold a moment of silence and open a cold one for our friend, the Gizmondo. Cheers, buddy. This 2004 Swedish gaming phone that looks like someone slapped a screen on Stewie Griffin's head. Wait, is that Pharrell? This bad boy never managed to get his feet off the ground. likely due to the fact that the CEO was found to be a member of the Swedish Mafia. You hear that, Casper? He was part of the Swedish Mafia. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy, buddy? That and the sales strategy was absolutely atrocious. Isn't that right, Casper? Casper. Come on, buddy. We're on air. Come on, man. Come on. You gotta stop taking mushrooms before we go live, man. Can't find good talent nowadays. There were two models of the phone. One for $400 and one for $229. What's the difference, you ask? Well, the $229 version had smart ads enabled. What does smart ads mean, you might ask? Well, smart ads are advertisements that are put directly onto the home screen of your new Gizmondo. How do they decide what ads to give you, you might ask? Well, they use information such as your location, giving you advertisements when inside of shopping centers for stores in that shopping center, or collected information from your text messages. Man, this Swedish Mafia member beat Zuckerberg to the data collection punch. That's honestly kind of impressive. Now we finally enter the open source 5. These swashbuckling pirates started out with the GP2X. Remember this guy? The overweight Xbox controller from earlier? Well, his younger brother's in town, and his younger brother is significantly more attractive. Look at that smooth, flat Game Gear. This puppy was a Linux-based emulation device. And it was definitely based on emulation because it only ever had 5 games released for it, so I think we know what the purpose of this thing is. Next on the open source menu in 2009, we have the Dingu. Is that seriously what it's called? Really, guys? The Dingu? This is an open source Chinese console based on, you guessed it, emulation. The most unique part of this permanently closed DS Lite is that it had access to the radio and could both screen and audio record. A streamer's handheld. This console did, however, do significantly better than the GP2X with over 1 million units sold. Some of these Chinese consoles are a little harder to pinpoint the sales numbers on because they don't actually have any reason to release them to US markets. The third member of our open source 5, we have the GP2X Wiz. Guys, you're really gonna throw another one out there? Your last one sold like 70,000 units. Now, obviously, this is an improved GP2X. It's smaller, it's lighter, it has better performance, and it's also a Korean meme being called the Myeongtendo. Because the Korean president, a month before this was released, made a statement about how Korea needed their own version of the DS. And his name was Myeongdu, I think. It's 2010 now, and it's time for the 4th member of our open source 5, the Pandora Radio. No, it's not the radio. It's Pandora. It's just Pandora. It's not the radio. Now, this laptop for mice is classified as a handheld gaming computer, which is a bit of a middle ground, but I think it's close enough for this video. This thick bottom boy was a crowd-funded competitor for the GP2X. It was supposed to be a more powerful and adequate version of the open source handheld, which was a really dumb business decision because the other open source handhelds at this point had sold a combined 125,000 units. That's not impressive. And now on to the last member of our open source team, the Canoe. No, not this Canoe, the GP2X Canoe. Wait, seriously, another one, guys? It's 2010. It's been a year. You gotta stop dropping handhelds. You're gonna go out of business. This one's really just the same thing as the other GP2X emulation consoles, except with better hardware and a slightly new design. All right, guys, we're finally done with the legally dubious open source 5. And now that we're no longer open sourcing on the open seas, the future is now. No, not him. He hasn't debuted yet. He got 2 more years. It's 2010, and there are rumors floating about. Nintendo just made a deal with Nvidia, a hardware deal to produce GPU chips for a new console. Some studios have received dev kits for a DS successor. It's E3 2010, and Reggie walks up on stage. He's talking about the games of the past, and then
3D Play on Nintendo 3DS is on the way.
And this baby isn't some give yourself a headache with some Devo-looking ass 3D glasses. I'm talking no glasses. This shit's got 2 layered screens. I'm talking depth. I'm talking, I still get a headache, but it is better. Enter the 3DS. Nintendo had a dream ever since the 80s of a fully 3D gaming experience. In 1988, they had helped produce a game for the Famicom 3D, a racing game called Famicom Grand Prix 2. They had developed and released the extreme flop that was the Virtual Boy. They even tried to make a 3D attachment for the GameCube. Only Luigi's Mansion ever used it, but they tried. The 2-tiered screen 3D of the 3DS was something that Nintendo had been working on since the Game Boy SP. The tech just wasn't there for the SP. But they tried again with the DS. But still, it wasn't cost effective. It was simply too bulky. But it was finally time. Time for me to strain my eyes in the darkness of my bedroom, refusing to turn the gimmick off while playing Ocarina of Time for the 5th time. Pretty soon, everything's gonna be 3D, man. We're gonna be running on those omnidirectional treadmill things, and we're gonna have haptics feedback suits on, and you're gonna feel it when you get punches. The 3DS had a rough launch. It was difficult for people to persuade themselves that it was worth $249.99. It just seemed like gimmick 3D on the DS we already had. It played the same cartridges and everything. Due to low launch sales, Nintendo dropped the price of the 3DS to $179.99. This decision alone boosted sales tremendously. That was added to the good PR they got for giving 10 to 15 free games out to those who had purchased the console at the original price. Good old generous capitalism. We could have afforded to sell this bad boy for $70 less the entire time, but we thought you sheep would buy it. Turns out it was just too much money because you're all way too poor. So here's 10 to 15 free digital download games that were made 5 to 10 years ago for pennies on the dollar to us because it's all digital. We've got the 3DS. We've got the 3DS with bigger screens. We've got the 2DS, which looks really weird. We've got the new 3DS. We've got the new 2DS, which is kind of just a big DS. Now, the 3DS is actually Nintendo's worst selling handheld console, with only 76 million units sold. This is behind even the Game Boy Advance, which only had a lifespan of 4 years, managing to sell around 81 million units. This is especially crazy considering that the 3DS was around for 6 years before the Switch was released. It was only discontinued in 2020, giving it a 9-year lifespan. This is compared to the 10 years of the original DS that sold double the units. The 3DS wasn't the only handheld to suffer in 2011. The PS Vita was released the same year and had significantly worse sales than both its competitor and its predecessor. Oh, that was a crazy flip, buddy. sad that it did so poorly because the PS Vita had an OLED in 2011. Not only that, but it has a touchscreen and has support for indie developers on its online marketplace. The PS Vita even had a strong launch, with 26 games on release, including titles from AAA developers like Naughty Dog and EA. And for years, it continued to receive support from AAA games like Assassin's Creed and Persona 4 Golden. It had all the ingredients for success. It even sold better than the PSP on launch. And yet, it didn't last. Wait, is that a real ad? What the fuck's AI generated? Despite its strong game library, the PS Vita never managed to do better than it did on launch, selling 1.2 million units within the first 2 months, but only managing to sell 2 million more in the next 2 years. The PS Vita was discontinued in 2019 and had a lifetime sales of 16 million units. Now, there are some theories as to why the PS Vita performed so poorly. Some think that it was because AAA developers stopped supporting the console after around a year and a half. Others think it's because it never received a Monster Hunter title, which was the game that boosted the original PSP's sales. Another theory is that they tried to pair the PS Vita with the PS4. Guys, the Wii U sucked. Why would you think that's gonna work? I have my own theory, however, and that theory is related to why the 3DS also performed poorly. Mobile phones. Oh, you want me to explain? In 2011, 34% of Americans owned a smartphone. By 2016, however, that number had increased to 77%. A massive increase. This was a huge hit to the handheld market. Why would you want a multi-$100 gaming handheld when your phone already cost $500 and has the hardware to emulate everything you might want to play? So smartphones are cornering the market, and Nintendo's handheld sales are very poor. Meh, who needs market research anyway, says the Neo Geo X confidently. But the Neo Geo X is like that guy you know, that has no reason to be anywhere near as confident as they are and has never actually successfully done any of the stuff that they say they're good at. And the Neo Geo X is much the same. Released in 2012, this console plays old Neo Geo games and nothing else. No new games. Smart move, boys. It was also produced so poorly that it was recalled from store shelves because of breaking screens and faulty hardware. Oh, and also lawsuits. You see, the Neo Geo X is an emulator for Neo Geo games. To do this, they installed Linux and used an emulator for Linux that plays Neo Geo games. An emulator they didn't make. And when I say they didn't make the emulator, I also mean that they didn't buy it or own it. So the guy who made the emulator for Linux sued them because, duh. Next in 2012, we have the Game Gadget. This open source British handheld. Wait, that's British? Doesn't look so bad for it being British. Nice work, guys. This bad boy runs on Linux and is pretty similar to the previous open source 5. All of these open source handhelds that are run on Linux are basically small emulator computers. So it really isn't that different. What it has going for it is that it's pretty small. In 2013, we have the GCW Zero. This kickstarted console raised $238,000 when it had a $130,000 goal. But the craziest thing about this console is that it was released within a year of receiving its Kickstarter funding goal, which is just... Kickstarter has changed. I'm looking at you, 10 years of development, Star Citizen. You like controllers, right? They're way better for gaming than phones. So what if I just, slapped a screen on an Xbox controller and called it good. Enter the 2013 NVIDIA Shield Portable. This can run games. And I mean it can run them quite well, actually. Not only that, but it runs on Android, so it's pretty easy for all you dumb smartphone users to figure out. But it's $300 and has no games that were made for it, meaning there's some weird inconsistencies. And it can stream games from your PC, meaning that it runs even better at home. Bro, are you really gonna play that in the pool? That thing is $300. Don't drop it. Sadly, it's ugly. Like, really ugly. Ugh. Well, the 3DS has been out for a year now. So that means we have our first knockoff. The GPD XD. You guys know what that means, right? It was intentional, right? This thing's basically a 3DS with one screen. It runs, you guessed it, emulators. To be fair, the design isn't terrible, but it also has nothing that makes it stand out. At least the NVIDIA Shield was a goofy controller thing. The interesting thing about these new modern open source handhelds is as the tech gets better and more compact, these things can run increasingly better games. With the GPD XD capable of running Xbox 360 and PS2 games. Next, we have a unique one. The 2016 Ardu Boy. This puppy is small. And when I say small, I mean 5 millimeters thick small. I mean, this bad boy fits in the card spot in your wallet small. I guess the size explains why this thing is so ugly. Well, it can run 8-bit games, including NES and original Game Boy games. It's only $39, so it's pretty cheap. This gaming credit card, sounds like I'm talking about V-Bucks, is still around, getting new iterations every year or two, including this guy, the Ardu Boy Nano. Okay, there's such a thing as too small. This thing is smaller than my thumb. I'd feel like a kaiju trying to play a Game Boy. Wait, that's actually kind of sick. Wait, it gets smaller? Okay, this thing looks like I'd snap it while trying to press a button. Another 2016 release, we have the GPD Win. Is it just me, or does this thing look really familiar? It's like the same thing. Now, to be fair, this is a significantly more powerful version of the Pandora. It's capable of running Windows 11, and this early 2000s flip phone is a real handheld gaming PC. One of the major problems with this handheld is simply the price. It was $500 on release, but GPD does seem to continue to support it, and it is a pretty nice version of a portable gaming PC. It's 2017, and bro, where am I? Whose house is this? What are you playing? Oh, is that a new Zelda game? Cool. Oh, it looks like it's like two Wii remotes. Oh my god, that's so sick. The Nintendo Switch. But first, let's rewind. Nintendo is a beast. The Wii and the Nintendo DS are breaking every sales record that the company has. Satoru Iwata is perfecting his backstroke in a swimming pool of yen. Who cares if our competitors are doing well too? We're doing significantly better. People liked the DS, right? Well, let's just throw that on a console. Let's just give them that map on the second screen on a console. They'll love it. And it did so well, might as well do a second one. We'll call it the 3DS. We'll throw some gimmick 3D on there. People will buy the shit out of it. 2012 is the first year that Nintendo had ever reported a loss since becoming a gaming company. The Wii U was a total flop, especially after the clean sweep that the Wii made on its initial release. The 3DS's sales are doing poorly due to an exorbitant release price and the competition of mobile gaming. And Satoru Iwata is beating off concerned investors with promises of innovation. So they went to the drawing board. This next console was going to make or break the future of Nintendo. Their end goal? Bridging the gap between Western and Eastern audiences. Western audiences mostly played games at home, throwing tons of hours into a single game over the weekend, while Eastern audiences tended to play games more socially, casually, and on the go. Inspiration for the Switch came from common criticisms for the Wii and the Wii U. Wii players complained that the controller was just too cumbersome. People imagined a controller that was more form-fitting and easier to hold. Wii U players complained that they couldn't use the tablet outside of their own home, likening it to a glorified controller. On top of this, the Switch is the first Nintendo console to utilize a pre-made system on a chip, instead of designing their own from scratch. This decision was made in hopes that it would increase third-party support for the console. You can even see this push with Skyrim being included in the release advertisement for the Switch. Miyamoto and Nintendo executives took a back seat during the development of the Switch, allowing a younger, more optimistic, and innovative new young team to do most of the development. Would you believe me if I told you that the Switch was considered a major industry risk? Many investors and consumers were wary of the new console, but Nintendo swore by Breath of the Wild, saying that the game would boost release sales, and the Switch performed, breaking console sales records worldwide. It outsold the Wii U within 2 years. It single-handedly increased console sales in Japan for the first time in a decade. As of recording this, the Switch has sold somewhere around 150 million units worldwide. It only falls behind 2 consoles, the Nintendo DS at 154 million and the PS2 at 160. We're in the final stretch. Can you believe that at this point we have gone over 44 consoles? Why did I go over every single one? From this point on, you'll see that there are really only 2 kinds of gaming handhelds. There are emulators for classic gaming, and there are miniature gaming PCs made as handhelds. The 2020 Evercade. This puppy uses ROM cartridges. Each one of these things has 20 games on it. Now that's a lot of games, but I mean, you could fit like the entire Game Boy library on a single large SD card, so it's not that impressive. This thing is slick. See those lines? That means it goes fast as fuck. It connects to your TV, displays at 720p, but the thing that really sets this console apart is that every single classic game is individually ported and optimized for the handheld. That means no messing with 6 different folders, finding ROMs on one of 20 different websites, starting to play the original game, but then realizing that it needs mods. So then you spend another hour modding everything for the one game, and after you've modded it, you play it for 10 minutes and realize that you didn't actually want to play it that much. The Evercade has actually done quite well, though, getting a console version later, and the Evercade 2, which is that the second one? Pull that shit out of a black jacket and you'll flashbang somebody. In 2021, we have the Analog Pocket. This one is a bit more unique. It has a spot in the back for original Game Boy games, so it's a modern hardware Game Boy. It does seem like this slot would fix a copyright issue, but you could put an SD card in it with ROMs, so it doesn't matter. Not much more to say. It's a Game Boy that looks like it walked out of an Apple store. Can I repair this thing? Next up in 2021, we have the Aeno Neo. Now, this one, I'm going to talk more about the company than just the original handheld. These are more gaming PCs with modular pieces, so you can buy nicer or lower budget versions. The interesting thing about this console is that it predates the Steam Deck and has a similar design. The company must be doing pretty well because they have a slew of different products all fitting in a similar sphere, some for retro gaming and some for modern computer gaming. But The newest one looks like it even has modular controller setups, which is honestly kind of sick. Steam. Everybody knows Steam. So Valve has money. And a massive platform of already established games. So Valve wonders, why not make a portable handheld? You see, Valve have been trying to make a different product. These guys. Steam machines. The problem was that although the Steam machines were relatively cheap, they were not easy to use. Valve tried to use Linux to run them, and nobody knows how to use Linux. So Valve did something that no other Linux-based handheld had done. It threw money at the problem. And it threw so much money at the problem that it developed this. Proton. Proton is like a layer on top of Linux that lets you play Windows games without having to do any of the crazy hassle that you normally would. And thus, the Steam Deck was born. Valve priced the Steam Deck aggressively, knowing that their biggest competitor would be mobile gaming, and that people would jump on the bandwagon and make a bunch of stuff that's super similar to it. It's a bit difficult to pinpoint how well the Steam Deck has done because Valve doesn't release those numbers. The most I could find is that as of sometime in 2023, they had sold around 3 million units. In 2022, we have the Thummy. This absolutely tiny console saw the Ardu Boy Nano from earlier and said, hold my microscope, it needs to be smaller. This very, very, very small Game Boy is very small. It is $9 to $35 and it is small. Bro, I would lose this thing in a heartbeat. Have this shit in your pocket, pull out your wallet, and it falls down a storm drain. This thing's so small, I feel like it's gonna no-clip into the back rooms. This Munchkin comes with 6 preloaded games and weighs in at 4.7 grams of pure anxiety. Well, keychain gaming. Care for a Thummy? After the Thummy in 2022, we have the Playdate. Man, Thummy Playdate sounds kinda... This kickstarted handheld is interesting. It comes with 24 preloaded games, and you get 24 games a year. I'm getting non-flashbacks, man. Subscription service on my handheld? One of the buttons on it is this crank right here, so that you can pretend that you're charging that camping flashlight that you thought was cool but never used, so it sat in your closet for 3 years, and then you found it again and kept it because you thought it could be useful in emergencies, and then... yeah... crank it. Now, on a more real note, this console is $200. And although it's pretty cool that it's super battery efficient, and you do get 24 free games and more games as the years progress, it seems like an unsustainable business model. Next up, we have the ROG Ally in 2023. This console was actually originally going to be made as a competitor of the GDP Win, but was pushed forward in development after the Steam Deck was released. And sadly, you can tell that it was rushed. It has a shorter battery life than all of its competitors, quoted at 53 minutes by a reviewer. Wait, 53 minutes, bro? What am I supposed to do, only take this thing onto the toilet? It also runs an unmodified version of Windows 11, which is extremely awkward to operate on a handheld. On top of these minor design issues, it also can overheat so much that it breaks the SD cards you put in it for memory, forcing you to use the onboard hard drives. And finally, our last, but certainly not least bizarre, the Techno Pocket Go. This puppy just began shipping after being kickstarted, and when I say just, I mean within days of when I was writing this script. Remember the hideous NVIDIA Shield Portable? Well, this is like that combined with Apple Vision. Have you ever wanted to look completely insane playing games with a controller and no screen on a public bench? Well, this is the console for you. The controller plugs into TVs for plug and play, and you can buy these super stupid looking glasses to play on the go. Did I mention that it costs as much as a beater car for both of them? So next up is the... Oh, was that the last one? Oh, thank God. So, gaming handhelds. Yeah? How does it feel to go through 64 years of devices? 57 portable pieces of tech. And goddamn, remember that 18-pound TV from earlier? Imagine handing the Techno Pocket Go to someone who thought that that was the pinnacle of tech. I would like to thank everybody who made it to this point in the video. I understand that it's likely going to be very long, and I tried to keep it entertaining, but I understand if talking about the specifics gets monotonous. It was a 25-page script. It took me weeks to research and to write, but I had a lot of fun doing it. Let me know if you liked it. Let me know about your memories of one of these handhelds in the comments, and like the video if you liked it. And please subscribe if you want to see more. I would really appreciate it. Last but not least, I have a Discord in the link down below. Feel free to join. Give me some video ideas. Let me know what you thought. There's not a ton of people in it, so it's not a super stressful spot to be. Anyway, thanks everybody. Deuces. Also, please subscribe. Please, please. This is a lot of work. I would appreciate it. Thanks.